Hacking Zoom. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm super honored to be speaking here today at DEF CON. This is my first DEF CON talk. I'm super honored to be here today. And I wish that we can all have a normal DEF CON and we'd be able to meet everyone in person, but hopefully next year when life gets back to normal. Yeah, let's start. So who am I? I'm Mazin Ahmed. I'm a cybersecurity engineer and I specialize in offensive security and AppSec. I also founded Full Hunt. If you haven't heard about Full Hunt, it's the next generation assets discovery slash monitoring slash scanning slash a lot of cool things that are happening in the background. If you haven't tried it or checked it out, you should definitely do. It will be one of the coolest things in security one day soon. Before that, I worked in the security engineering of Proton Mail. I'm also a bug bounty participant where I reported security vulnerabilities to Facebook, to the Department of Defense, to Twitter, and many others. I'm interested in web, infra, mobile, and cloud security, WAF evasions, security automation, and DevSecOps, and many other cool things in security. And you can read more at mazinahmed.net and you can find my contact details there. And yeah, let's start. So the agenda for today, of course, we're talking about hacking Zoom. But before that, we need to have a quick intro about Zoom, just in case. And then we're gonna have a background, findings, a retrospective on the Zoom's last minute VDP, recommendations, final thoughts, and then we would have a room for Q&A. Zoom. Everyone knows it today. Everyone is using it. It's literally in everywhere in the world. Almost every company is using it. Governments use it too. We saw last week the hearing of the Twitter hack where the hearing was done via Zoom and that hack happened at the hearing live. It was quite bad, but yeah, so this proves that everyone is using it. In May 2020, the market valuation for Zoom is 50 billion USD. I'd like to bring this chart here. This is a comparison between the market capital of Zoom against the top 7 airlines in the world, including United and Delta. So combining the top 7 airlines market capital, Zoom would be either equal or have a higher market capital. This is crazy just to think about it, how Zoom became today. And the rise of Zoom started with the global pandemic. Everyone knows about that. So from a stock performance, almost all of the companies were in the same range as we can see here, and then it actually skyrocketed by May with all what was happening, and meanwhile all of these top airlines were quickly falling down, as we can see. For me, I just find this really interesting to imagine how Zoom became today. Yeah, and because how important is Zoom, this is where my research started. So in March 2020, Patrick Walder gave a talk at Opcode about the Zoom security and the state of security at Zoom, and he disclosed a number of security vulnerabilities in the Mac OS client of Zoom, and this brings a lot of attention to the media and to me personally. And from that, I got more interested and started my research from there. So what was tested before? the Zoom macOS app. It was tested. We can read about it in the media, and we can read about it in researches done by Patrick Warder and many others. It was hacked. It was really bad. It was reusing really bad practices. There was a lot of Zoom privacy concerns, and yeah, the way that Zoom is sharing data to Facebook, and a lot of things we can also see. But what was not tested before? Of course, many things. This is just I just shared two, but many things has not been tested before. For me, I'm trying to take into a couple of things and that I will be showing now. One thing that was not tested was the Zoom Linux app. Nothing. I have tried to search about any research or disclosure for any vulnerability in the Zoom Linux client. I haven't seen anything. This is one thing that I wanted to see or to focus on. The Zoom external attack surface. Zoom became huge, and there was no focus on the external attack surface of Zoom. The Zoom cloud infrastructure, how it's being set up, and different things related to the infra. And of course, the Zoom's new end-to-end encryption implementation. We have seen it in the media. Did anyone test it? We can talk about that later. And of course, many. There are a lot of things. I only focused on these. Definitely, there is a lot of room for research in this area. So the findings agenda, I'm not gonna go to each one of them now. We will talk about them later. It's just here for people who are curious to see what we're gonna talk about. A quick disclaimer: the entire research is non-funded. This is a non-funded research. I have done everything here in my spare time, just to confirm that or state that. The research background. The first finding that I identified was in April 2020, and my expectations did not match what I was seeing in the media. We will know how later. The first conclusive response for my finding that I reported in April 2020, I got it in July. This wasn't a very pleasing experience, and this after a lot of follow-ups, of course, from my side. And after submitting the CFP to DEF CON, the second round of research started, and at that time I identified additional 6 new different vulnerabilities and security related issues, and of course everything was reported to Zoom, and the reward was $0. Yeah, I just want to say that. So the first step for doing any type of offensive research is the reconnaissance. Understanding the attack surface. That's where I started with. I used fullhunt.io to get the Zoom details. The API returned around 13 domains, and this is the list of domains that was discovered. I took a portion of them and analyzed them. The remaining are there. If anyone would like to have a test drive, feel free. And let's go to the findings. One thing that I noticed, that there was 2 servers that are having a Kerberos service running, and when I saw that, I got interested to see what's happening there. Apparently, there was 2 exposed Kerberos servers that was exposed unintentionally to the internet, and no one knew about them. So this one had also a web service running on port 80, and it was free IPA. If you don't know what's free IPA, it's an identity management solution that was developed by Red Hat. It's open source, you can check it out. And I started by testing the web interface. As you can see in this screenshot, when you are providing an invalid username, you can see that there is a Kerberos error that is telling you that. And one thing that I did not mention here, that whenever you see a Kerberos server running, it by itself it's not huge, but once you compromise it or you have a single credential that is valid, then this would open a crazy large amount of attack surface for you to attack. And that's what I was doing. I want to get initial foothold there and then go from there. So I started doing user enumeration there, and you can see here the previous one was showing that there was an error. This user is not found by the keyend. And here it's saying that the authentication failed, or the pre-authentication failed, which means that we are able to identify valid usernames. And then I started building word list based on different things to identify more usernames so that I can brute force them. I compiled the word list from the pattern that I have seen. So the pattern that I have seen for the Zoom emails are first name dot last name at zoom.us. Also, the common usernames that I was able to find to get, and the employee names, of course. I compiled them all, and I did that for user enumeration. The only user that I found was admin at idm.meetzoom.us. I then ran a number of brute force sessions on them. Nothing interesting happened. Then I saw that I'm hitting a rabbit hole and it's a dead end. So I just moved to another more interesting thing that I can find. And yeah, it was a good choice. So the discovery of a memory leak on our Zoom production server. Zoom allows uploading profile pictures on accounts, which is the typical thing. The process for that is, first, the user uploads a profile image, and the profile image is either JPG, GIF, or PNG. And this is the tricky one. If the image is PNG or GIF, it's converted to JPG. And if the image is JPG, the image conversion is not triggered. And there is another thing here, that if the image contains an invalid image header, the updating profile API aborts the process. So there is a good check in that image header. And it's using, of course, magic bytes by checking the magic bytes. I like to test image conversion or processing softwares, or whenever I see an API that is utilizing that or using that, I know for a fact that there is a large potential of having something bad happening. And the reason is because image conversion is not a vital functionality in an infrastructure of a company or even a web startup. So what happens is it often gets forgotten, and there's no security updates that are being applied there. As far as it's working, then it's fine. This is something that I have seen as a pattern, and that's why I started testing that or focused on that. So one cool exploit here or security vulnerability that was released in 2016. It was known as the image tragic exploit or vulnerability, and this vulnerability allowed having remote code execution into the instance that is running the image processing when providing certain payloads. You can read more about the CVE offline. So I have tested this one, and they seem to have this one patched. So I moved to the next one. It did not work, so I moved to the next one. There is a vulnerability in ImageMagick that was reported in 2017, and it works by having whenever the palette is uninitialized or not presented in the GIF file, basically, ImageMagick leaks portions of the memory to the generated or the rendered image. And this is the fix for the vulnerability that was issued at that time, around July 2017. I generated a payload that renders this way on a normal browser or normal software that is patched. But when I upload the payload to Zoom, it renders this way. But if you are reading the report for that CVE, this is the typical behavior of having the exploit being successful. And if you download this image and try to decode to obtain the strings format, or you would find that it's taking some portions of the memory. Then I thought that maybe this is an, let's say, image processing software fault or best effort just to render the image that is corrupted, or there is a problem that is happening because of rendering a black image. So I generated a new one that is not the payload. It's not one that this one has initialized palettes, and when I report it, it renders normally. Okay, this sounds really interesting. We have a memory leak on Zoom production. Typical thing is to automate the exploitation for that, and the flow for that would be to generate a new unique payload, then to upload it to Zoom, wait for the rendering to happen, download the rendered file, extract the data from the corrupted file that was rendered by Zoom, repeat, and store leaked memory portions. So this proof of concept does that. I'm going to have a demo time, which is cool. Here it generated the image and uploaded it to Zoom. I'm downloading the image now, and here recovering the dump. So here, a memory leak on Zoom production wasn't not the end for that. I remember that in 2018, Travis Ormande released a research on GhostScript, which was used by ImageMagick. And his research revealed a number of critical vulnerabilities in GhostScript. And the proof of concept that he shared in the research when doing image conversion can can lead to a remote code execution. And it was really cool to see this. And what I did is I used the proof of concept that Travis wrote, and I will show you this thing. First, so we know for a fact that the 2016 3714, the image tragic, is patched, but we kind of think that the ImageMagick memory leak is presented based on the proof of exploitation we had here. And that one was patched in released. The patch was released in May 2016, and the patch for the memory leak was released in July 2017, and it's not patched. Based on that, we can safely say that the GhostScript RFC is not patched, right? So I wrote I brought the proof of concept from the research that Travis Ormandi wrote, and I replicated it locally with the same environment. I assume Zoom have it on their setup with the same version that with the same range of versions that Zoom is using mostly, and yeah, it's working. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm not sure which one would suit that, but Zoom API/p/upload checks for magic bytes. Otherwise, a full exploitation would have been possible. But still, this does not mean that Zoom is safe. If there is any particular API that is utilizing the same functionality and it's not checking the magic bytes, this would lead to a full remote code execution. This doesn't sound nice. This doesn't sound good by any means. And I don't know how to say this, but the RCE vulnerability is probably still there in Zoom production. Another thing we have here is the shadow IT and Zoom. I have noticed that there is a number of instances or cases where Zoom have shadow IT servers running in different host names, and they are not properly configured. They may be a good target for conducting a successful attack. I have seen this in multiple occasions. This example here is showing an instance that did not have any patches since, let me check, September 10th, 2019. I took this picture in July 4th, 2020. Around 10 or 9 months of time frame. There was no patches on that server for all new builds. And we all know that there was plenty of security vulnerabilities that was reported to them, and yeah, you can imagine. Another cool thing here is the same host had 9 active connections, including me. Makes it an excellent fit for doing any type of testing without triggering alerts, which is cool, so that you can test it and be safe in the part that it won't be as detectable as in testing Zoom.us, the main website, or yeah. Enough about all this, and let's start to talk about the Zoom app for Linux. One cool finding here: Zoom Linux client. So the TLS is broken by design on Linux, and you're gonna see how that is happening. I don't see this as the best practice, especially for the Zoom, but we can talk about that. So whenever there is any traffic that is intercepted with a custom TLS certificate, Zoom prompts this message. While it looks normal, everything is fine here, and whenever you click trust anyway, then you would have the certificate, like the traffic going with that, like with this accepted certificate, which is the untrusted one. But what happens here is that this certificate, like the hashes for the fingerprint for this certificate, is saved locally with the same permissions of the user, and you can simply just plug in, like if you have a malware that is able to see your to have access to your machine, you can this malware can safely or easily just plug in to the fingerprint of the SSL certificate, and then all of the traffic that is going to Zoom can be intercepted, even if it's using SSL or TLS, because the certificate will be accepted without having to have these type of prompts, because it was added to the local database on the background. So I wrote a simple proof of concept as a sample of what a malware would look like, as just in a way or another as a concept. And this particular part of the malware or the proof of concept would get the fingerprints for all of the forged certificates that we have, and then it would add it to the Zoom database, a local database. And once it's added, these certificates can be provided or to Zoom, and all the traffic would be passing without having any error like this. And yeah, all of the encrypted traffic could be intercepted when having a malware running on the same user access as this one. Well, I have to say this is not a really bad vulnerability. It's just relatively not the best practice to do that. But as we are going now, we're gonna see something that is really bad, and we're gonna see it now. So I would start with this question: what's a bad design for an application launcher? Good question, and we're gonna know the answer. So user bin/zoom is a symbolic of opt/zoom/zoom launcher. And whenever Zoom is called, Zoom is printing the following logging data on the SCD out. And there is a part where you can see Zoom path is opt zoom, and then zoom not exist at current directory. Okay, this looks interesting already. What's happening in the background? Zoom checks for files within PWD, and if there is an executable called Zoom, literally, on PWD, it executes it as a child process for Zoom, user bin Zoom. I was mind blown when I saw that. Why would this be there? This is a proof of concept. I created a file and then execute called Zoom, and then Zoom checks on the PWD if there is a file called Zoom, literally, and executes it. Of course, it has to be with an executable file permission, but this is not a thing. So imagine this: you have application whitelisting. There are a lot of points that I can make here, to be honest. That is that would show how this old design is there for. And if there's anything related to application whitelisting and you're whitelisting Zoom, and this would literally break that, because this is executed as a child process of a trusted application, Zoom. And yeah, it's bad practice and bad design by all security, by all means. Like, why would this be implemented this way? So that's my answer. What's the bad design for an application launcher? I would be Zoom application launcher for Linux. Another bad thing happening here. So the Zoom local database implementation, you'll see now. So in the configuration files of the configuration directory of Zoom, there is this file. There is the local database is zoom.us.db. This is the default database, and a lot of other files that are there for Zoom. The most important file is the Zoom US because it has the access tokens, it has all of the PII for the user and everything. And as we can see here in the screen, it's run the file permission is 644. I'll show you this. 644. This gives to the user a write and read access. Okay, sounds reasonable. Nothing bad on that. Group access to give it read access. Why? Really? Are you sure about that? But everyone to have read access into the Zoom local database of the Zoom user. Why? Literally, that's what I had in mind. Any code on the user machine that have access to the any code that have access to the user machine can read and exfiltrate Zoom local database database and configurations and more, of course, because the permission or the file permission for the Zoom local database is set to be read by everyone. And okay, another thing that is quite cool, Zoom is end-to-end encrypted. Is it? We can see later, but my answer is not fully. One awesome product by Zoom is Zoom Chat, and it's advertised in their website, and that we can see here as a platform that is that makes work and collaboration much easier in mobile and desktop, and with a really clean and design and UI that looks kind of similar to what Slack is having. This is not the point, but it looks good as a product, right? And as we go back here is, yeah, there are so many cool things to read, but I would focus on the security part. As we can see in the security and archiving, and I quote, Zoom encrypts data at all times. Again here, encryption of data in transit and at rest, and then encryption for data and mobile devices. Your messages in this chat are secured. Another one. So there are a lot of advertisement that is going with how secure Zoom chat is happening, and by security they don't really or necessarily talk about application security level of security, but they are talking about how all of the data that are being passing here is encrypted both at rest and in transit, which is in transit. I assume they are saying that it goes in SSL. It's cool. But at rest, this means that they have full end-to-end encryption happening, right? And yeah, repeating again the same sentences. And let's watch this. Not sure. Let's play it this way, it's fine. But on the right screen, we have Zoom chat running, and I have my group chat that is clear with no messages, and then I'm sending some sort of an encrypted message that is here because Zoom is E2E by now, E2E encrypted by now, as advertised. And then on the left side we can see the local database, a custom one that is made by Zoom, that we can see for that they have it, and I can just read what's happening there and what they are storing on your local device. So here I sent a message and it's saying that this is secret. Oh well, just 1 second, I have to repeat that. And yep, the message is being stored locally at rest in clear text. And here anyone who is able to have access to the user machine is able to pull a full archive of all messages that are being sent that were or are supposed to be end-to-end encrypted, and it's saved in plain text. And yeah, this does not sound good, and it's not the one that you can have a record as or a backup for your messages. It's just a debugging feature that they left open in production for the Linux build. I'm not sure if this is applicable in Mac OS or in Windows, but you can see if it's that it's being applicable here in Linux. By the way, the fact that the same database that for messages is having the 644 where is it, the 644 user permission, which means that any code would be that is running despite what type of user is running, user permission is running, is able to access this end-to-end encrypted chat archive. Doesn't sound good. Yeah, so Of course, I could have gone more and tested more, but at the end, this is just a time that I have spent in to fuzz around with Zoom. I did this for for curiosity purposes mainly, but definitely I could have spent more time. But then, yeah, I jumped to the responsible disclosure now, and I started the experiment in around April 15. We reported that in April 18. I contacted Lotus Security in Twitter, followed up with the vulnerability disclosure again on 26. Couple of messages in on the background. In May 5th of 2020, I received request closed memory leak at zoom.us. Yeah, here. So yeah, I wasn't happy. So what's next? Tweeted about that, and then I was asked to send it via HackerOne, internal communication running to run my automated exploit for the memory leak. Then when nothing seems to be happening, I informed Zoom that I'm planning to present my ongoing research here at DEF CON. And then Zoom told me that they cannot assess the issue as there was no sensitive data seen, despite the producibility of the vulnerability on the provided exploit. Then it was closed as not applicable. Sure. Then I sent on July 11th my new research results, reporting new 7 different security vulnerabilities, 6 to 7 new vulnerabilities. I got an acknowledgement about receiving my report, and by the way, this is the first conclusive response regarding the memory leak issue. And by conclusive, I mean that they did a full analysis of what was happening. On the previous ones on HackerOne, they were trying, they triggered it as valid, and then they were trying to run my exploit, and that's all. But this one, they researched more and analyzed more about how this is happening and what was the cause of the issue. And it was in like literally 3 months after I reported it. Then further explanation from Zoom regarding the vulnerability or the findings in general. Okay, now with what was happening, and then from their explanation, and then my response regarding each analysis that they provided. So for the public authentication, yeah, you can see what's happening here, what they wrote. And well, yeah, for me, yeah, while agreeing this may be a forgotten server that was mistakenly exposed, I haven't seen any references of 2FA being implemented, but in all cases it's down now, so it's great. Oh wait, I think I messed up with the messages here. Anyway, so this is the same slide from last one. So we did check that image magic is not used for image conversions here. But wait, the same vulnerability is being reproduced. It's maybe a fork of image magic, or an image processing software that is vulnerable to the same CVE of not being able to parse GIF images of that have an initialized palettes. This sounds reasonable. In all cases, it's clear that something is wrong, right? Shadow IT and Zoom. So these are not non-sensitive information disclosure from a shared environment. Information hygiene is important to us, and we appreciate you reporting this finding. So that's great. So Fullhunt can help here. Probably the best product out there for mitigating shadow IT risks. Oh, I think part of the discussion regarding the image conversion is not placed on the slide, but please check my blog after that to have the full list of discussion. So for what was happening for the Linux app findings, they fixed it or patched it in 5.2.0 that was released in August 3rd, I think. They were supposed to send to patch or release it on August 2nd, but it was released on August 3rd. In all cases, I have read the changelog. There was no mention whatsoever for any security patches, so clearly it was a silent fix, which it wasn't a nice thing. At least users should have some transparency of the state of security for the company that they use or trust. Yeah, the patches. I just told you about how like the patches for what happened for the Zoom Linux app. For what was happening with the image conversion, they decided to not patch it because they are not seeing sensitive data, and then that are being exposed. Then what happened is they stated that they are not using image magic, but still the same vulnerability behavior of the vulnerability is being reproduced as a result of the image conversion. So clearly something bad is happening, but I'm not part of Zoom or I don't have a say on Zoom to have them fix that. So my responsibility is just to, as part of the research that I'm conducting, is to just let them know, and that's all. What else? The findings, the shadow IT. I'm not sure if they started reviewing all of their shadow IT instances. That's something that they're supposed to do. For the Kerberos server, they took it down, which is good, which is awesome. And yeah, they told me that they are patching all of the vulnerabilities for the Linux app on the release of August 2nd or August 3rd. It was released with no mention for any security fixes or updates. Yeah, it was a difficult experience to be able to report these vulnerabilities and to them. In the beginning, there was a lack of communication, despite all of what was happening that I was hearing in the media. Every now and then, I see that Zoom has patched a critical or severe vulnerability that was even attacking things that are less riskier than what I have found. But it was generating a lot of media PR that is bad for or negative to Zoom, and I assume that was the reason why they are patching it that quickly, comparing to my experience to Zoom VDP. And yeah, of course, I did not release anything that I found before this talk to like other parties or unauthorized parties. And yeah, so it was not mentioned in the media before. I did not share it with anyone in the media. That's why, probably one reason it wasn't that fixed, or my experience wasn't as the same as the vulnerabilities that was shared in the media. And that's one thing. I'm not sure, but I would be surprised if I'm the only researcher in the world that had this experience with Zoom security. I would be really surprised about that. Another part is the massive growth versus security. Zoom has massively grown in 2020 in a way that no one could have imagined. Zoom has been here forever, and what the growth that they got during 2020 was something that for me it was like no one would have expected this to happen. And this reflected a lot on the security. A lot of people have clear focus on the security of Zoom since it became a part of our lives. Everyone is using it. I use it. My company use it. Everyone that I know use Zoom. And that's why security is extremely important now for Zoom. And the thing is, having security means that you have to have a full security program running. It's not that easy to have a full security program, and there are a lot of things to consider when doing that. For me, when I build security programs in companies, I take a lot of time to do that, and this is the typical thing. Even if we have the highest budget, like similar to what Zoom is having, it does not come to how much budget is allocated to Zoom security. It's about different processes that should have been already done before the pandemic. And having a last minute security program or a last minute VDP, vulnerability disclosure program, is not easy and can cause a lot of errors and mistakes happening, lack of communications and focus. These type of patterns that I have seen with Zoom is something that are possibly happening to all of the researchers that have been reporting to Zoom responsibly. I'm just saying that there is a lot of work for the security program at Zoom to be done. The reward, yeah, that's another thing. One thing that I also seen that Zoom counts have as advertised a bug bounty program, and then have the reward for all of the research that I have conducted as $0 USD. This is not a bug bounty program. I can see this more of a vulnerability disclosure program where people are freely allowed to report security vulnerabilities to Zoom. But you cannot market that in your website or in the media or whatever as having a bug bounty program. Or maybe they have a bug bounty program, and despite all of my communications with Zoom, they did not inform me about that. I don't know. In all cases, this is the reward that I have received. It was $0. I talked about this, about the expectations that were set by media and how Zoom is focused on patching security vulnerabilities and patching it quickly. And yeah, and the reality that I have experienced. So this is at the end of the research. At the end, I would like to thank Matt Switch for his help in making this research available. I also want to give a shout out to 971sec. It's a local community in Dubai and the United Arab Emirates that are active in different aspects in security. And at the end, thank you everyone for taking the time to attend my talk. Thank you again. And if there is anything or any questions that you have in mind, feel free to email me or DM me at Twitter. This is my Twitter account and this is my email. My website is there. Thank you again and have a great DEF CON.